So good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. And uh, this morning we have the pleasure of welcoming back Susthama Kim, who will be speaking to us at Heartland Sen on a topic that is, I am sure, familiar to all of us, and that is anxiety. She will be using as a text a sutta from the Pali Canon entitled Fear and Terror. Uh, Susthama has practiced Pure Land Buddhism for over 20 years, and 3 years ago, she was named head of the Amida Order, a position she still holds. She has years of experience practicing as a chaplain and as a psychotherapist, and she does have a practice in psychotherapy in London now. So without taking up any more time, I will turn things over to Susthama. Just give me a moment. Good. So we're back, and Susthama, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here today.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and welcome everyone. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about the ordinary mind as opposed to the enlightened mind to give us an idea of how the mind works before we jump into living with anxiety. So the ordinary mind starts with dukkha and most likely will end with dukkha. So we just tend to go around in circles. And the Buddha talks about 3 levels of escape. And so this is this is what we all do and what everyone experiences to different degrees. And so um, the Buddha talks about the first level of escape, which is our escape, our distractions through sensory pleasures. So when we encounter pain, we don't like it. We seek escape from it. And so that's the first level. And we do it by whatever our particular likes are. So for some people, it'll be eating. For other people, it'll be a particular type of food. For others, it might be something um, more stimulating, like drugs or smoking or drinking. It could be anything that takes our mind away from the pain. And then the second level is when that particular escape mechanism becomes a habit. So whatever it is that gave us relief from the pain tends to become something that we do without thinking. And so smoking is, I think, a good example. When we start smoking, it's very difficult. And also, if the particular escape mechanism happens to be addictive, then that doesn't help. So, so when we do something once, it's very easy to do it again and again, even when there's no suffering or no pain stimulus. We just get into the habit of doing something. And then over time, the that that habit pattern, and this is the second level of escape, becomes an identity. We identify with whatever the habit pattern is. So if the escape mechanism was something like smoking, for example, the identification as a smoker would be the second level of escape. We now have an identity that gives us some kind of sense of self, sense of something permanent in us, that we are this way. So once we start using language like I'm the sort of person who, and then dot, 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 that shows the creation of the identity and the self. And that works to a certain point. We could easily go through a certain number of years in our life feeling comforted by the method of distraction from the pain until that habit pattern becomes a source of suffering itself. So when all of a sudden we can't stop doing what it is that first gave us relief, and that escape mechanism starts to create pain in our life, we can't then escape using the same habit pattern that is causing the suffering. And so then we move into the third level of escape, which is to seek oblivion. We then need to destroy the thing that's causing us pain. And this is when anxiety and depression can get to a level that's really difficult to live with. And so the Buddha has also given us so many different ways of living with this. The dukkha is a first noble truth. It's not something that is shameful. It's something that's noble and it's true. And anxiety is dukkha. Anxiety is something that will happen to all of us. It's part of being human, and there's nothing shameful about that feeling. Yeah. So the sutta that I'd like to look at now is it's I think chapter sutta number 2 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and some people translate it as fear and terror, others fear and dread. And in this sutta, it's all these suttas were written down after the Buddha died, so it's a story about the Buddha talking to a Brahmin about how awful and scary it would be to go and sit and meditate in a forest that's secluded and remote, and how anyone who hasn't got a mind that is concentrated and purified would just fall apart. It would just become too terrified to sit and feel at ease. And the Buddha talks about a time when he found it too hard as well, the time before he was enlightened. And so he shares his own process of what he did. And this is where we get an understanding that anxiety or this fear is something that happens to us. And it's not something to ever get rid of. It's something that we don't have control over. And so there's no, saying, oh, I'm going to purify my mind so I never experience anxiety. The Buddha is saying the way to deal with it is so he says, why do I go into the forest and expect to feel terrified and full of dread? Why don't I sit and focus the mind? And when it comes, I'll watch it come. And when it goes, I'll watch it go. And so this is the method that he used in the forest. He sat in his meditation posture, and he said, I'm just going to sit in this posture. I'll listen to all the noises, sense everything with the senses, and as the fear starts to come up in me, I'll watch it. And I'll stay sitting. I won't react. I won't move. I'll stay until it subsides, it subdues. And if I'm walking, then I'll keep walking as the fear comes, and I'll keep walking until the fear goes. And if I'm standing, I'll stand, and if the fear comes, I'll stay standing until the fear goes. And the same with lying down. So there he describes the 4 different postures of meditation. And so this sutta is very much indicating a way to stay with the meditation posture and to be open and welcome whatever comes up in us without moving, without changing that particular posture. And in the sutta, he talks about the four jhanas. These are levels of concentration in the mind, and they're like degrees. It's like going from using applied and sustained thought. So if you are in the first jhana, it's very hard to focus on just one object. So for example, if you had an itch, it'd be very difficult to keep your mind focused on an object. Let's just choose a random one like the sun. When there's an itch, the mind will go to wanting to scratch the itch or to make the itch stop. So the first jhana is very much applying and sustaining the focus on the sun and really trying to ignore the itch and not to move. And then if the mind can keep the object there and not move, then the mind goes into a quieter state. So this is the second jhana. And he says, this is the state of mind where you're not bothered by the itch, and you don't even have to apply or sustain the thought of the object. The object will just come to mind and it'll feel so blissful because you're focused on it without having to put any effort in. And the itch will be there, but you won't mind. So everything is so pleasant. It's wonderful. And then after this, the third jhana is where there's more equanimity. The itch is there, the object of focus is there, and there's a peacefulness. It's that point where everything is okay. If the itch were there, it would be okay. If the itch weren't there, it would be okay. There's a kind of detachment from any kind of feeling of pleasure. Everything is just peaceful. And then the fourth jhana is going even deeper, where there's no pleasure and no pain. There's almost like nothing, nothing to disturb the thought. The object of focus isn't there either. It's just completely detached from everything, and one is completely equanimous. But the Buddha also says that these states of minds are, fruits of the Dharma, but that's not all. There's something else. So for a lot of people who try sitting and meditating and can't achieve that level of mind concentration, we have something in the pure. So this is where we move into my territory of Pure Land Buddhism, which helps those who lack the ability to meditate at all, who can't even get to the first jhana. We're too busy thinking, this itch is bothering me. I want to itch. Why am I sitting? I can't sit. So we have a way of helping us with our anxiety through a method called other power. So you could say this sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya is for those who can, who use self-power. It's very much in your ability to focus the mind. And with that, when anxiety comes, you're able to keep focusing on the object and the anxiety eventually goes. For those who can't, they use a method called other power, where there's a Buddha who vows to help those who can't do things for themselves, called Amida Buddha. And in this particular tradition in Japan called Jodo Shinshu, there's a term called myokonin, and myokonin translates as a excellent, wonderful, radiant, bright person. And it's often what a devout, pious, sincere, true believer of Amida Buddha would be called. They have this faith in Amida Buddha so that they feel accepted. And if with their faith in Amida Buddha, they then can accept their karma. And if their karma happens to be the anxiety that they live with or that they have, then they accept it. They don't try and not be anxious. They just accept that this is their karma. So to help get an idea of Myokonin, I thought I'd share a story about this particular Myokonin who lived in the 12th century Japan. And his name is Kuhi, and Kuhi he was a very violent and cruel person, a peasant, before he came across Buddhism. And then after he learned about Shin Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, he changed and he became a kind, warm-hearted person. So that one day in the summer, it was very dry, and so he took his cattle up into the mountains to get them some grass to eat. And along the way up the mountain, he looked down and he saw his rice field was dry. And the stream that would water the rice field had been blocked. And as soon as he saw that, he turned around and he went back home. And when he got home, he asked his family, his children and his wife, to go into the family altar room to give their thanks and to worship Amida Buddha. But his wife was confused and asked, why? Why? What, what are they thanking Amida Buddha for? Because he hadn't done any work that day and just came home with nothing. And so he explained what he saw, and he told them that in the past, before he came across Shin Buddhism, he would have taken revenge and he would have gone to his neighbors' water passages and blocked them. And he would have been very angry. And he could see now that this was his karma and that his water passage was blocked because of something that he must have done in the past. So he accepted this completely. And instead of taking revenge and retaliating, he wanted to express his gratitude to the Buddha and Amida Buddha for giving him this teaching of accepting his karma so that he can go to a better place once he died. So once the neighbors found out what happened and heard what he'd done, they felt deeply ashamed. And the story goes that his rice paddy, his rice field, was always full of water after that. So these Myokonin stories are of simple people who have this faith in Amida where they accept everything. They, to the point where, I find it hard to see how you could be like that. But for them, their faith that Amida will save them is enough for them to do very loving, kind-hearted things. And then we have the Bodhisattva way of living with compassion, where there's a Bodhisattva called Quan Chi Yin, and Quan Chi Yin translates to one who hears the cries of the world. And so anyone who is feeling anxious and worried and needs to talk could call out to Quan Chi Yin, and Quan Chi Yin would come and listen. So this 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 kind of exercise is difficult for one person to imagine, but for those who feel a connection to this bodhisattva of compassion, can then talk about whatever is going on in them, even if there isn't a person. So you could journal, for example, or you could sit in a room with the statue and you pour your heart out. So this is a method where Kuan Yin wants to know all about your anxiety, wants to know all the details and would be so curious. So as opposed to the first method, which is to focus the mind on something different, and the anxiety comes, but you don't think about it. You just wait. You keep the mind focused on something until the anxiety passes. This method is very much of be curious about those feelings. Really go into what does it feel like in you? Where do you feel it in you? How would you describe it? And so you could say that working as a therapist, one is playing the role of Kuan Yin by being interested and curious about the anxiety that another person is experiencing and wanting to get as much detail, wanting to go deeper, wanting to know all the ins and outs of where did it start, what caused it, where does it, where does it occur in the body, what sort of story are we telling ourselves about it? What if anxiety had a voice and it could talk, what is it saying? Everything, until one feels that they've shared their burden, released it, given it to Kuan Yin. So Kuan Yin is now holding all those feelings. So there's probably other ways of living with anxiety, but I thought I'd start with these three and then pause and see if there's any questions. Yeah.
Would you label the three again? I
Yeah.
feel like I've been listening, but some of them blended together,
Yeah.
and I appreciate explicit. Thanks.